Well, welcome back to another episode of the Quiet Out Loud, where my co-host and favorite rapper, the real Slim Shady, has decided he wants to stand up. But for those who are new to the show, welcome to the Quiet Out Loud, where we like to talk about the quiet parts that in across just about everything. Per our usual disclaimer, the individuals who are speaking on this podcast are representing themselves and only themselves, not past, present, current employers, which, as I say, current and present are the exact same thing, but semantics. And also, opinions are subject to change, not to be held in perpetuity. We like to get into it, but we don't want to hold these things forever. So, without further ado, I would love to have our guests today introduce themselves.
Hi, thank you guys for having me. So I'm Mason Swafford, CEO, one of the co-founders here at Tenzo. Before starting this company, I was an AI researcher, so I worked in startups, I worked in self-driving. I studied AI before it was as cool at Stanford, and then I did my PhD research was in had a deep bias ML model. So I don't know if we'll get into some of that stuff, but definitely excited to meet with you guys.
But we will definitely get into anything that where you want us to take us, because there is a lot there that we'd love to play with. So I will let Ben take us away here.
Mason, so glad you could join us. Let's hit you with the first question. What's the quiet shh in your space?
Yeah, there's a couple thoughts I had here, but one that I think maybe will cause a little bit of controversy, and I think people aren't talking about, but it's job displacement, job change. It's happening, and it doesn't matter if you don't like it. It doesn't matter if you're against it. We're not going to stop technology from progressing. Um, Even if your company doesn't adopt it today, they're going to adopt it in 5 years when the board or the CEO or whoever says, we're losing money or we're not being as efficient because X, Y, Z. And what I'm telling everyone is, do you want to be the horse and buggy driver that didn't learn to drive a car when they came out because you said I'm sticking with it because, or do you want to be the one that really got early in and understood automobiles and said, okay, yeah, I'm gonna switch there and I'm gonna become the invaluable person in that. And so, I think some organizations are trying to prevent AI adoption because they're worried about potential job displacement or job changing because they need actually a different skill set in people and upskilling and everything. And I think that as a leader, you're actually doing a disservice to your team by doing that because you might help them this year or maybe next year, but then in 3 years, are they going to be as employable for ultimately when you do have to, potentially lay people off or change jobs or something? Are they going to be as employable as the person that immediately was learning how to adopt all these tools today? And so I probably will get some hate for that, but I think that's my honest truth.
Well, I mean, I don't think you're going to get hate from either of us. You're going to get questions asked.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the very first questions, like talking about job displacement, obviously is a very very hot topic. Talking about skills displacement, also a hot topic. And then you're also touching on what is a company's AI strategy. And so I think
Yeah.
there are three very distinct pieces there. I have three different questions for each of those, but I think the biggest question that comes to mind, at least initially, and certainly Ben and I have had these conversations too, is what is that displacement going to look like in your opinion when it's not so much that the AI usage is coming in and immediately killing a job, but it's that slow burn of no longer having that job. And I think when Ben and I talk about it, we think of like what is the future of being a recruiting coordinator if all these tasks and all these things are going away from are being automated out. People will say, oh well, the recruiting coordinator position will go away, but people aren't necessarily looking at that impact downstream of that archival knowledge then being taught to the next generation of people. So in your eyes, what do you see there in terms of job displacement, like how displacing one thing, like displacing the keystone species has a huge effect on the environment.
Yeah, I mean, great question. I think ultimately what it's going to lead to is that people take a little bit more time out of high school, college, whatever they're coming into the workforce to frankly become productive. Because right now, those are kind of our entry level jobs. We're like, hey, a coordinator, can you send an email with times? You know, in the most basic sense. I don't want to belittle the valuable work a coordinator can do, but most basic sense, that's some of the work. And now it might be, you kind of have to come in as a full recruiter. And so people are going to have better training programs for that, right? To really say, here is, and really even some recruiters that think that they're recruiters, they're just screeners, and screeners are going to get displaced. Like it is no longer going to be viable to look at a bunch of resumes and decide who should move forward arbitrarily to your round where you do a call with them and you're looking at a scorecard and you're saying, how do they hit on this scorecard and then push them forward? Like recruiters are going to become sellers. They're going to, have to be really up level to that. And so I think a good analogy is if we look at how the legal profession has changed over the last 20 years, entry level lawyers used to come in out of law school and they were just the researchers. All they would do is sit in the library and a partner would say, I'm working on a case, can you go read all the books and find me a couple, key pieces here? And then we got Google, right? And so then the law library cleared out, and so then that person was Googling. And now with ChatGPT, obviously there's still issues, you have to fact check and everything, but like those entry level lawyers, they're not displaced. We still have just as many people graduating from law school, but instead they're making it to partner faster. They're dealing with client interactions faster. They're doing that stuff because you just have to. You're still going to need to kind of train that next generation, and you're still going to, but you just kind of have to immediately have them be doing those higher value tasks.
Yeah. Well, one thing you said there, Mason, I want to key in on because you mentioned, oh, well, the people will graduate school and they'll take some time to like learn the skills that they need. How do you see that changing earlier on? Because I would argue that that's going to be too late. Like we are going to be a decade behind as a society, right? Teaching our kids how to use this technology. Like I think about how we implemented the PC or the Mac or into the education system. Like it's taken 30, 40 years for the system to finally catch up, and that's part of how we do our work. How do you see this fitting into what that strategy is for us? Like, because we're talking about the workforce, I'm thinking about what's the next generation gonna learn that I never even thought about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I've got all the answers there because I think there's a lot of questions, right? I think parents are going, I don't want my kids using technology so much, right? They're spending all this time online. I want them interacting in the real world. And then there's the balance of, well, if all the jobs require this technology savvy, obviously there's a lot of great careers that don't require any technology use. Trades are really booming right now. But let's just assume that you want to go into technology jobs. Like you do need that familiarity. So I think there's a balance, and I do hope that schools, there's a balance between where to use AI and where don't you, right? Like we grew up with calculators, but you still learn basic arithmetic, right? So there's the building blocks that you should still learn, and you should not use AI, you should not use computers, you should do that stuff. But then, none of us learned how to use an abacus. Well, maybe, I didn't learn. Did you really?
I did in
Okay,
preschool.
okay.
I remember playing with it in preschool and like them teaching me about how to use it. So I'm probably an outlier.
No,
Okay.
I did too. So
Okay. Well, then maybe I'm speaking for myself. But I didn't learn how to use an abacus, right? And it's perfectly okay. But I still had to do my times tables and all of that stuff. And so I think that's the balance that you know teachers and educators and systems, college, everything are going to have to balance. Which is we want them to leverage these tools, and we shouldn't make them essay writing. Like there's going to be a balance between you need to still understand how to craft good copy, how to make a good argument, because you should understand that, but you also shouldn't have to do that without AI forever. Maybe it's like when you're in middle school, you're doing it without AI, and when you get to high school, they're like, all right, now let's start using AI here or something. I don't know what the exact balance is, but I still think that we should do some of these skills pre-AI, call it, to build those foundation and building blocks, but then we should also learn how to leverage all the tools there.
Well, and I think to your point, you've touched on this kind of in both your answers and through, which is like the level of knowledge that's needed to be learned. And I think certainly certain people are pointing at how AI and how AI prompting looks, that you it could make a stronger case for the liberal arts education of being able to try and really hone in and think on a be able to deconstruct that problem into its smallest parts. I mean, it's all essentially modal logic going through and through. But you've touched kind of on this, which is like, where does the response? Where do you? I'll phrase it this way: where do you think the responsibility lies in terms of making sure that people are enabled? Because you talked about, all right, we're going to need to learn this in school, but that's going to obviously, schools that have better funding, better access to certain things are now going to really 10x the issues and the inequalities. And then you mentioned kind of if companies companies can hold back their people, because you'll get that forever argument of why is it important for a company to make somebody who's going to then get poached or taken because they have these skills and things like that. So I'm just kind of curious, like, at what point do you think that the companies are responsible for the social good of making people better when it might not actually benefit them long term? Or because of the work that they're going to be doing with AI, is it going to be benefiting them long term? Because you will forever have the consciousness of Ben, and if I want to run something, I'll be like, run it like Ben did it, because I really liked the way that did it.
Yeah, that's great. And honestly, this is aptly named for the Quiet Out Loud, because I feel like we're diving into dangerous waters now, right? Talking about the responsibility of companies versus government, education, and I love that. I personally think that, education is one of the biggest issues in America right now, and that is where, frankly, if I had a second of me, or once everything goes really well, hopefully with the company that we're building, that's where I want to dedicate a lot of resources, because there is a lot of broken stuff there, right? I went to a very large public school in Indiana, and I made it to Stanford, where I was there with people that were the wealthiest families in the world, and they had all these privileges in schools and tutors and SAT, all the prep, all that blah 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 blah. And it is, I think there's a massive amount of inequality. And then the question is, personally, that's where I want government intervention. I don't think that we should have companies be responsible for that, both because I think it's hard to force them to. Like, companies, frankly, it's this is my opinion, but capitalism, I think, fairly works if we have companies look out for their shareholders, and as long as we create rules and laws and stuff to make sure they're not acting illegal, and then we need the government to make sure everyone is kind of equal playing field, right? Not equality of results, but equality of playing field, of education, of setup, all of that stuff. But I think that if we do try to rely on companies to do good, in the end of the day, they won't, unless we make it laws and requirements. Because why would I, again, talking about the company that chooses not to adopt AI right now because it's helping their employees, or they don't want to have job displacement, in 5 years their shareholders, or whoever owns the company, is going to go, why are we doing this? Right? We're falling behind, we're not making money, and ultimately the shareholders will vote for different results there. So I definitely agree that we need changes in everything, but I don't know if we can hold companies to that.
Yeah, I 100% agree, Mason. Like, companies, individuals, groups, they're all going to act in their own self-interest, and we see that play out day after day after day. And you rightly point out the education system is one that is slower to adopt, and it acts in the self-interest of the things that push education forward or backwards. And we can save that commentary for another time, because I'm sure we all have a lot of points of view on that. But talking about self-interest, let me pose our second question to you, Mason. What's the quiet in your career?
That's a great question. So I think I would say that I see a lot of smart people doing things with good intentions without first understanding and becoming an expert in that area that they're moving into. And so, I think that on the surface, I probably look like a complete outsider that got into the recruiting TA space. I don't know. What do I know what I'm talking about, right? And I guess for context for listeners, we build AI recruiting agents. But actually, in my last company that I was at, I actually spent 3 months just being a recruiter. I was an AI engineer, and then we were opening a new office, and we didn't have a recruiter for it, and I was in charge of the office, so I said I'm just going to be a recruiter, and so I was a recruiter for 3 months, and then I then spent, before starting this company, I spent 6 months just talking to recruiting leaders, spending time with recruiters, sitting at their desks with them, going to staffing agencies, even like recruiting agencies, going to the head, understanding what are those, old school tactics, cold calling, all of that. And I spent 6 months learning all that to get into the space. And I think that people that are technologists getting into recruiting should do that. But at the same time, people that are recruiting or in any field then get into the technology side need to do the same. They can't just rest on the laurels of I understand this industry, because what I'm seeing right now, particularly in recruiting, is there's a lot of bias issues that are going on with AI recruiting startups because they assume that these LLMs are all powerful or very performant, and they don't understand necessarily how that there's very simple stuff you can do, but it will prevent long-term bias, because a model, an easy thing anyone can do with ChatGPT or Gemini or anything is take the same resume, same job description, and have the model score it and just be like, give me a score, and ask it to do that 3 times, and you're gonna get 3 different results. And that is not what you should be doing in your process, and that is what 90% of companies are doing with AI in their recruiting function, and it is abhorrent to me.
Yeah, I think you hit on something there really important. It goes back to what we were just talking about. Like, we're creating more opportunities. There are lower barriers to entry, especially in the micro SaaS space, where it's like, I have an idea, I can go quick vibe code the shit out of that, and 2 weeks later, I'm going to go try and sell my product to as many people as will listen to me, and I can get on the horn. Right? It's happening everywhere. It's great. Like, I love that it's giving people the experience to be able to do that, but how do we rein some of that back in? Because it's taxing not only our industry, it's taxing our economy and job seekers probably tenfold to that even. And like, how do you figure out what is that going to look like? I think we're in this transitory phase, but like, I hear you. It's much easier to do, but how do you do it responsibly? And I haven't yet seen anybody write about how do you do this responsibly. Like, what's the playbook for if you're going to do this technology or take this technology? Mason, we've been on calls together. We talk about all these places that do these wrappers, right? Like, I'm just going to do something and ship out a wrapper. It's like, really? Is that real? And how do you get people to understand? How do you talk to people to get them to understand they don't understand the technology yet that they're promoting? And we even heard recently, sorry, I'm going on a huge monologue here and I'm not meaning to, but we're starting to hear like the Zuckerbergs and the Sam Altmans be like, we are now at the point where we can build models that will train themselves and like learn from themselves. And it's like, hey, wait, we're all just getting used to like the entry point of like, hey, can you build me a grocery list for next week, right? Like, what's that going to look and feel like? Sorry, I just realized I ranted out loud for like 2.5 minutes, and here I am. No question, the end.
Well, with that kind of in mind and us coming up in time, Mason, we'll probably have to have you back for another episode, but where can people find you? How can they reach out to you and tell you that, and then we'll close up shop here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. Connect with me, Mason Swafford on LinkedIn. Come check us out, Tenzo.ai. If you're looking for help in increasing your recruiting efficiency and you want to really up-level your team to focus on the human parts of the job and not the parts that can and should be automated, then come check us out.
Sounds good. And we'll put those links in the show notes for people to find. And then you wanna play us out?
Yeah, thank you everybody again for another awesome episode of the Quiet Out Loud. We'll see you next time. AI, AI, AI.